During my college days, my best friend John and I were inseparable. We lived together, and honestly, we were a terrible influence on each other. Not because we lacked brains, but because we constantly chased thrilling, reckless ideas. We'd always find ourselves caught up in some foolish exploit, like exploring crumbling old houses, or pulling off dangerous, often forbidden stunts, such as scaling tall water towers. Tonight, though, we cooked up a plan that seemed almost tame compared to our usual wild antics. Our bright idea was to venture into the deep woods behind our small town in the dead of night. We figured it would give us a good scare, a jolt of adrenaline. While woods hugged our town on all sides, the ones we chose were different. This was the part nobody ever went to. John and I, despite our daring nature, had never even stepped foot there. Decades ago, a massive fire had left a large section of town on that side, completely deserted. With nothing left but ruins, the woods themselves felt forgotten, wild, and trackless. We grabbed our flashlights and set off. It took us about half an hour to walk from campus to the edge of town, then another 10 minutes through the burnt-out district to reach the forest's edge. Once we knew we were alone, we switched on our flashlights and plunged into the tree. Within minutes, the distant glow of town lights vanished completely. All we had was the dim moonlight filtering through the leaves, and our narrow beams cutting through the gloom. For the first 20 minutes or so, it wasn't particularly exciting. The initial spooky thrill of stepping into a dark, unknown forest at night faded. It was just silent, an endless sea of trees, with no old buildings or strange markers. Then, without warning, John spotted something far ahead. A strange light cut through the inky blackness between the trees. It was definitely a flashlight beam, not the natural glow of a campfire or anything organic. And oddly, it was sitting low right on the ground. As we crept closer, we confirmed it. A flashlight, abandoned, just sitting there. No person, no campsite, nothing else around. It was a regular electric flashlight, meaning someone had to have used it recently, likely tonight. Otherwise, the batteries would have surely died. How could anyone forget or drop such an essential item in a forest so utterly dark? It was a clear beacon, impossible to miss. The only logical explanation was that someone had dropped it while running, and if they hadn't returned for it, they must have been running from something. A cold shiver ran down my spine, a clear warning sign to turn back. But the thrill of the unknown, that rush of adrenaline we craved, was already surging through us as we swept our lights around. Still, we agreed it was wiser to leave the flashlight alone. What if it wasn't what we thought, and someone was coming back? I took the lead, pushing deeper into the woods. John close behind. Now both of us were driven by a morbid curiosity, eager to uncover the full unsettling story behind this strange discovery. Less than 2 minutes after leaving the forgotten flashlight, a sudden sharp crack echoed behind us. It sounded like 3 or 4 sticks breaking, one after another, perhaps 20 or 30 feet behind where John walked. We both spun around, flashlights cutting through the dark, but saw nothing. Our nerves were definitely on edge. We walked for another 5 minutes when the sound returned, again right behind John. This time, I could have sworn it was the quick footsteps of someone running through the leaves and twigs. Still, we saw nothing. After that second occurrence, our earlier excitement was replaced by a deep, unsettling creepiness. This was more than just an adrenaline rush. This was genuine fear. We felt like we were in real trouble. It was strange, because we'd considered this trip far less risky than our usual stunt. What were the odds of actually encountering someone out here, in this deserted part of the woods, in the middle of the night? We couldn't be absolutely sure it was a person making those noises, but it certainly sounded like. After maybe 5 or 6 more of these unsettling sounds, we heard it again. As we whirled around, we glimpsed a shadow slip out of the edge of our flashlight beam and disappear behind a tree. John must have seen it too, because we both froze, staring into the darkness for what felt like an eternity, far longer than any other time. Barely 10 seconds later, the head slowly moved into view from behind the tree, peering directly at us. We didn't hesitate. We immediately bolted, veering to the side and then tearing back the way we'd come. We sprinted through the trees for a solid 5 minutes, hearts pounding, before slowing down to catch our breaths. Then, with our flashlights on a low beam, we walked quickly all the way back to town. Strangely, we never saw that abandoned flashlight again. Someone, perhaps the one who stalked us, must have picked it up and turned it off. Back on campus, we still couldn't believe what happened. Who was that person, lurking in those forgotten woods at night? It made no sense. We can't confirm this was connected, but a few days later, word spread about a missing person last seen, heading toward the back of town. There's no knowing if they vanished there, in the woods, or if their disappearance somehow tied into what we experienced. The truly disturbing part is simply the thought of what secrets we might have stumbled upon in those woods. If we had allowed that strange figure to keep following us, or pushed even deeper into the forest, I can't imagine what horrors we might have uncovered, or if we would have ever made it back out alive. Years ago, I moved nearly 1,000 miles inland from the far west coast. My journey cut through the northern U.S., avoiding the busy main highways. These roads were far less traveled, often requiring detours onto winding side routes to reach my destination. Though scenic at first, the charm of the drive wore off after several trips back and forth. This was my final journey, my car packed with the last of my belongings. I'd been on the road all day, finally reaching a small town where I pulled over for a quick nap around 6 p.m. I woke around 9 p.m. and got back on the highway, but barely an hour out of town, my car began to choke. Warning lights flared on the dashboard, and the steering felt loose, unstable. It quickly worsened over the next 5 minutes, until I knew it was unsafe to drive. I managed to pull off onto the gravel shoulder, a bitter irony that this breakdown had to happen in the absolute middle of nowhere. I knew these roads well. There wasn't another town for at least an hour in either direction. No cell service, just endless woods, stretching in every direction, and not another car in sight. I slumped back, taking a moment to absorb the situation, then stepped out to inspect the car. I knew nothing about engines, but I hoped for some obvious fix. There was none. My old car had simply given up. Standing there for a few minutes, I started to realize how utterly creepy this road felt. Sparse, weak streetlights barely pierced the darkness, revealing an endless tunnel of trees. The silence was absolute. I distinctly remember thinking how much it felt like the start of a horror movie. My only hope was for someone to stop and offer help, either a ride to the nearest gas station, or some other aid. So I leaned against my broken car and waited for another vehicle to appear. To my surprise, after just 15 minutes, a car approached and actually pulled over for me. The driver, a man who looked to be in his mid-30s, smoking a cigarette, rolled down his window. He studied me for a moment before asking if I was all right. I understood his caution. Picking up a stranger on a deserted road was risky. I quickly explained my car trouble. He paused, thinking, but I noticed his eyes constantly darting to his rearview mirror. Maybe it was just my imagination, but something about him felt deeply wrong. This wasn't a moment to be particular about help, yet every alarm in my head screamed at me not to get into his car. Well, hop in, he said. I can give you a ride to the next town. Don't mind helping someone out tonight. I hesitated, trying to find a polite way to refuse. Oh, thanks, but I actually have a friend on his way, I stammered. He should be here any minute. Sorry, I forgot to mention it. The man nodded, a cold, unfriendly smirk twisting his lips. Then, without another word, he sped off, disappearing into the darkness. His reaction confirmed it. I had made the right choice. But an entire hour passed, maybe even more, and no other cars appeared. I hadn't realized how truly deserted this road was, and the middle of the night didn't help. I was practically dozing, propped against my car when headlights appeared, coming from the direction I was headed. I waved. They slowed, pulling up beside me. A strange déjà vu washed over me. The car looked eerily familiar, like the dark sedan from an hour ago. All black sedans blur in the dark, but this felt distinct. When the window rolled down, it was a woman, perhaps in her late 20s, driving. She immediately asked if I needed help, yet her tone felt off. She offered a strained, nervous smile as if forced, almost reluctant to help. I told her I just needed a ride. Anywhere at all. A gas station. A town. She nodded once, unlocking the passenger door. I couldn't risk refusing another offer, so I quickly got in. Immediately, a disturbing feeling settled over me. She said nothing, her eyes wide and fixed straight ahead. "Thank you for picking me up," I said, trying to break the heavy silence. I don't know what I would have done. She never asked about my car or why I was stranded. She offered no response, simply kept her gaze locked forward. Something was profoundly wrong about her, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was, so I sank back into the seat, trying to rest as we drove on in unnerving quiet. We drove in this strange quiet for about 20 minutes. Then I saw a sign for a gas station, just 2 miles ahead. Relief washed over me. I told her she could drop me off there. She didn't look at me, just gave a brief nod, her face utterly expressionless. Getting close, I asked if she was okay. She darted a quick glance at me, then back to the road. Her eyes held a look of sheer terror. It chilled me to the bone. Just then I caught a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision. My gaze snapped to the rearview mirror. What moved was reflected there, so instinctively I looked back. My heart plunged. In the dim light, the back seat was dark, and a figure was hunched low behind my seat, almost trying to hide. The moment I looked, he sat up straight. In the faint light I could just make out his face. It was the same man who had stopped for me earlier, the one whose offer I had refused, and his expression was pure fear. I whipped my head forward, seeing the gas station approaching, and urgently told the woman to pull in and drop me off now. But she didn't slow. She was going to drive right past it. It all clicked into place. This woman was a captive herself, likely forced by the man in the back to pick me up and drive us wherever he intended. I pleaded with her to turn into the gas station, but the man roared from the back, shouting threats, demanding I shut up and telling her to keep driving. We hurtled toward the turnoff, still moving at least 50 miles an hour. To my complete shock, she suddenly cranked the wheel, making a sharp, violent turn into the gas station, slamming on the brakes, just inches from the fuel pumps. Immediately, she flung open her door and dove out. That was my signal. I launched myself from the car and both of us sprinted for the gas station doors. Inside, she frantically told the night clerk to call the police, while I watched the man scramble into the driver's seat and speed away. My horrifying suspicion was correct. We had both been victims of that twisted man, intended for abduction. I'm endlessly grateful she found the courage to defy his threats and pull into that gas station. She could have so easily obeyed him and kept driving. What might have happened then, I dread to imagine. Thankfully, I never had to find out. I work at a small 24-hour diner right off the highway. It's far from glamorous, but the owner is a good friend, and I needed a job just to get by. It's better than most diners because it's rarely swamped with customers. It's mostly a stop-off for truckers or travelers on long road trips, looking for coffee or a quick meal before hitting the road again. That brings in some interesting people, but since I work the graveyard shift, it's usually incredibly quiet. Tonight was no different. Only a couple of people had stopped in for coffee, then quickly moved on. After they left, an entire hour stretched out with nothing. I sat by the window staring at the empty highway, lost in my thoughts. Around 1 in the morning, a truck finally rumbled into the parking lot. I moved behind the counter and greeted the two men as they stepped inside. They both looked utterly exhausted from a long drive, and like most others tonight, they ordered 2 black coffees to go. One headed to the restroom while I started making the drinks for the other, who sat at the bar. "Hey, I've got a strange question," he said. "You're not here alone, are you?" His words made me freeze. I couldn't figure out his angle, but he seemed harmless enough, so I decided to be honest. "Yep, just me tonight. It's been pretty quiet, so I don't mind." He seemed surprised, almost disappointed by my answer. "Well, just be careful," he warned. "We saw some guy around the side of the building when we pulled in. Looked like he was up to no good, but I figured maybe he worked here. That's why I asked." I thanked him for the warning. The other trucker emerged from the restroom just then. I handed them their coffees, and they climbed back into their truck, disappearing onto the highway. After they were gone, I went back to the window, scanning both sides of the parking lot. It was completely empty. I'd been watching all night, and I would have noticed if another car had pulled in. Our only parking was out front, so any vehicle would have been visible, yet the trucker didn't seem to be lying. After a moment, my curiosity mixed with a creeping unease. I cautiously went outside and peered around the building. I saw nothing. I walked the entire perimeter, but there was no one. The dark woods surrounding the diner felt particularly eerie, so I didn't linger. I hurried back inside, telling myself the tired trucker must have simply imagined it. He certainly meant no harm. Still, from that moment on, I kept my guard up. The diner remained deserted. No customers and barely any cars on the highway either. It was a truly sluggish night. I washed a few dishes, swept the floor, then took a quick break to use the restroom. I was on my phone, taking my sweet time, when suddenly I heard a door open. I quickly finished up and headed back out, calling out my usual cheerful welcome in as I stepped into the diner, but my words died in my throat. Every seat was empty. After a beat, I nervously circled the floor, but found no one. I knew, absolutely knew, I had heard that door open. It was a sound I heard countless times a night. I went to the front door, pushed it open, and scanned the parking lot again. Still no car. I tested the door. It was sturdy. No way it could have just swung open on its own. There wasn't even a breath of wind outside. My stomach clenched. The trucker's warning about someone lurking around the building echoed in my mind. Was he right? Was someone truly out there? I tried to shake off the creeping paranoia, telling myself I was just scaring myself, and decided to finish the dishes. I stayed behind the counter, scrubbing the leftover plates from earlier shifts. Amidst the clinking and clanking of dishware, I suddenly heard another sound, a distinct rustling, like something moving. I quickly shut off the water, dropping the plate I was cleaning. I heard it again. Before I could even peek around the corner, the man emerged. He walked directly from the back room, as if he belonged. He appeared to be in his 40s, with a scraggly gray beard and messy medium-length hair, wearing a rumpled navy blue hoodie. He offered a small smile and settled onto a bar stool. I stood frozen, utterly stunned, my mind racing. How was he back there? What was he doing? I wanted to demand an answer, but terrifying fear kept me silent. "I'll have a coffee, please," the man said abruptly, shattering the silence. I nodded, my hands trembling slightly, as I reluctantly started brewing it. I could feel his gaze burning into the back of my neck. My only hope was that if I gave him what he wanted, he would simply leave. I handed him the drink, and he smiled again. "Just you here, huh? I bet it gets lonely. Not many folks passing through at this hour." Sometimes I guess, but it's not too bad," I managed, hating every second of his presence. Yet he kept talking. "How long do they make you work the overnight shift?" "Till 3, 4 in the morning." I told him my shifts varied, careful not to give away any specific schedule. Finally he stood, thanked me, and gave another unsettling smile. As he walked out, I watched him go, not to a car, but simply up the road, disappearing into the darkness. My heart pounded. Everything about him felt deeply wrong, chilling and disturbed. For the next 15 minutes, my eyes were glued to the windows. The unsettling feeling was magnified by how little I understood what had just happened. Was this the man the trucker warned me about? If so, he had been lurking around the building for hours, which made the whole encounter even more sinister. I dreaded going back to the dishes, or doing anything that would force me to turn my back to the door. But then, as I stared blankly at the highway, I heard that sound again, the unmistakable creak of a door opening, just like before. This time, being in the main room, I knew it wasn't the front door. It was the side access door, the one leading out to the dumpster. I scrambled around the counter and peered into the dim hallway. One of the closet doors was gently swinging open and shut, as if someone had just passed through it. Without a second thought, I bolted outside, jumped into my car, and sped onto the highway, dialing the police as I drove. When the police arrived, they found him still there, surprisingly, hiding in the closet. It was the same man who had unnerved me just moments earlier. But that wasn't the most disturbing discovery.
He had a coil of rope on him. After a quick search, the officers found a hidden stash, partially unearthed in the forest behind the diner. Inside were tools and other disturbing items, clearly intended for unspeakable acts. He must have been watching the diner, waiting for the right moment, then came inside to confirm I was alone. His plan, it seemed, was to slip back into the woods, grab his dreadful gear, then quickly seize me and drag me back to his horrifying setup. Thankfully, he's now locked away for a very long time.